room froze. Not a word, not a breath. Lena stood in the center, her hands still dusted in flour, eyes steady and fierce, yet tightly restrained. In her grip was a faded printout, an old, creased recipe sheet her late brother had submitted 8 years ago, just months before he was gone forever. To anyone else, it was just another recipe. But to Lena, it was a piece of her brother's soul, a memory pressed between layers of time and grief. That single page held months of laughter, of trials, of quiet hope shared between two siblings who once believed they could create something lasting together. They used to dream that one day his name would hang proudly above the display case, etched into the fabric of something real. Instead, the very same formula now adorned the wall of the bakery as if it had always belonged there. No name, no credit, not even a footnote. Lena swallowed back the sting of tears. Her voice stayed even, but her silence roared louder than any accusation. Across from her, the manager leaned back in his leather chair, lips curling into a smug smirk. He didn't need to raise his voice. His posture said it all, that casual arrogance of someone who'd never had to defend his worth. "Who do you think they'll believe?" he asked, almost lazily. "Me? The head of one of the top bakery chains in the city? Or a pastry girl punching a clock?" Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. She already knew the rules of this world. People like her didn't get heard, they got dismissed. But deep inside, something was screaming, not for fame, not even for justice, but for dignity, for her brother, for the truth that someone had buried under polished logos and corporate pride. And then, just a faint shift in the corner, barely noticeable. The new trainee who'd been silent the whole time stepped forward, slowly, purposefully. The fluorescent light above flickered just enough to catch his face. Scruffy hair tucked under a cap, jaw tight, eyes sharp with something more than curiosity. No one in the room knew that the man now standing at Lena's side was Jackson Reeves, the founder and current CEO of Golden Harvest, undercover, disguised as an intern to understand what no executive summary ever truly reveals. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His silence said everything: disappointment, realization, and a quiet simmering fury that chilled the air even colder than before. Then he turned and walked out. But from that moment, everything began to change. No press releases, no dramatic announcements, but quietly, methodically, contracts were reviewed, job titles revisited, and those who once smirked now faced the slow unraveling of their illusion of invincibility. Because change doesn't begin with slogans. It begins with a look, a choice, a moment. And Lena? She hadn't shouted, she hadn't pleaded, but she had stood her ground, carrying not just a recipe, but a story, a promise, a loss that refused to be silenced. That was the moment when Golden Harvest stopped being just a bakery. It became a reckoning, a symbol of quiet revolution, all because of one woman, and the heart she never let die. In the early morning, she moved like poetry. Lena was shaping her morning buns, rolling, cutting, folding, with a grace that wasn't taught in culinary school, but carved into her muscles through years of relentless repetition. Not once did she look up, not once did she pause. Watching her was like watching a solo performance, a symphony played with only 2 hands. Every movement was intention, every breath, precision. At exactly 5:00 a.m., the front door buzzed open. A tall man in his early 30s stepped in. His name tag read Logan Pierce. He offered a polite smile. "You must be Evan," he asked casually. Jackson, still cloaked in his undercover role, nodded and adjusted his posture into the slightly hunched, hesitant stance he'd practiced. "Yeah, thanks for letting me come in last minute," he replied. "No problem. Logan waved him inside. They've been sending folks down from HQ lately. Something about aligning local operations. You know, corporate lingo. He rolled his eyes, not disrespectfully, but with the exhausted familiarity of someone who'd read too many memos written by people who had never pulled a tray from a 400-degree oven. Jackson smirked inwardly. The alignment initiative? That was his idea. Logan led him through spotless tile floors and empty display cases, the air already rich with the warm scent of butter, cinnamon, and caramelized sugar. The kind of scent that pulls people in from the street, even if they never intended to stop. They reached the kitchen. Lena was already there. She hadn't moved an inch since Jackson first saw her head down, hands moving with flawless repetition. "That's Lena," Logan said, his voice dropping to a near whisper like they were entering sacred ground. "She handles all the artisan prep, especially the morning buns. Been here longer than any of us. Doesn't talk much, super territorial about her station." Jackson said nothing. He didn't need to. He watched her, really watched. The way she worked wasn't just skill, it was compulsion, obsession. Muscle memory formed from grief, survival, maybe both. She wasn't a good baker. She was extraordinary. And he knew that light. He had carried it once too. "What time does she get in?" Jackson asked, voice low. "She's always here before 4:30. Logan replied. "Technically, we don't start until 5, but she just shows up and starts working." The morning flew by in a blur of introductions, tutorials, and walkthroughs. Jackson played the part, asking how to load the industrial mixer, pretending he didn't know how to weigh yeast. Logan was patient, helpful, clearly a capable team lead. But Jackson's eyes kept drifting back to Lena. Every tray she loaded into the oven came out flawless. Her morning buns, tight spirals of cinnamon and brown sugar, emerged golden and gleaming, kissed with just the right amount of caramel glaze. By 7:00 a.m., the line outside stretched around the block. Customers came in, asking for her pastries by name. They left with smiles like they'd been handed a gift, not just breakfast. Around 9:00 a.m., Jackson caught Logan during a lull. "Those buns," he said quietly. "They're incredible." Logan grinned. "All hers. People drive across the city just for them. She won't do interviews, won't be in any marketing, doesn't want her name on the board. She just shows up, works. You must be invaluable." "She is," Logan replied. "But she's also kind of a mystery. Doesn't hang out after shifts. Works 6 days a week, sometimes doubles. Never takes time off." Jackson nodded slowly. He recognized the look, the rhythm. That wasn't ambition. That was survival. And something told him. Lena Hart wasn't baking for a paycheck. She was baking for a reason. Without another word, she returned to her work, as if the moment had never happened. "Well," she muttered, voice almost lost in the whir of mixers. "You're not terrible. That's more than I can say for most of the trainees they send us." The rest of the shift melted away into a blur of heat, flour, and soft conversation. By closing time, Jackson's back ached, his shoulders burned, and his feet screamed a reminder. You haven't done a real kitchen shift in over a decade. And yet, Lena kept going. She scrubbed the ovens, restocked the sugar bin, dragged a 50-pound bag of flour across the prep line without a word. Raphael, the head baker on duty, tried to step in. "Lena, you don't have to do that. We can split it." "I don't mind," she answered. Calm, steady. As the last customer left and the lights dimmed up front, Jackson stood quietly in the corner of the kitchen, watching her scrub each tile on the floor by hand. She didn't glance at her phone, didn't linger, didn't join the others headed for after-work drinks. She simply removed her apron, washed her hands, and left through the back door. Alone. Curious, Jackson followed at a distance. Out back, behind the store, she approached a rusted bike chained to a lamppost. She clipped a small backpack to the rear rack, checked the tires, and then pedaled off into traffic. No car, no Uber, no subway pass. Just a woman, a worn-out bicycle, and a life fueled by cinnamon, flour, and a promise she refused to let die. No car, no Uber, no subway pass. Just an old rusted bicycle, a silent escape route, and a woman who baked like her life depended on every single pastry. That night, in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, Jackson sat on the edge of the bed. His laptop glowed dimly, while his handwritten notes were spread across the faded hotel comforter. Operations, nearly flawless. Staff, capable. The product, especially Lena's, was nothing short of exceptional. But something didn't add up. Why was someone with this level of skill, consistency, and impact still pulling in base pay? Why would she turn down every promotion, avoid the spotlight, refuse even the simplest of tips? Jackson pulled up her personnel file. Lena Harth, 34 years old, hired 8 years ago. Position, artisan pastry prep. Performance, excellent. Promotions, offered, repeatedly declined. Then something caught his eye, a payroll notation, a recurring deduction, paid to Hamilton Financial. Jackson leaned back, eyebrows furrowed. 8 years, no advancement, no vacations, always volunteering for overtime, denying every raise. And now this, a regular payroll deduction to one of the most notorious high-interest lenders on the West Coast. He whispered under his breath, "What are you really fighting for, Lena Hart?" Because what he was seeing was just the surface of something much deeper. A glacier of silence, of sacrifice, of something no one else seemed to care about, but had shaped her every breath. By the third day of his undercover role, Jackson had adjusted to the rhythm of the bakery. He always arrived by 4:50 a.m., 10 minutes early, only to find Lena already there. Lights on, mixer humming, her movements precise, deliberate, quiet. She offered him a small nod in greeting, no words, no small talk. She wasn't rude, she was elsewhere, operating in a world where the only things that existed were flour, butter, and the ticking clock. The day before, Jackson had casually asked a few of the younger staff members about her. "She's been here since before anyone even knew this location existed," said Zach, the college kid who worked mornings. "Customers ask for her more than they ask for prices, but she never comes to the front, says the dough needs me more than people do." Kayla, who worked the register, chimed in. "Last Christmas, a bunch of customers left crazy tips just for her, like big ones, but she made us split them evenly, said she didn't want special treatment." Jackson listened closely. Every detail painted a picture that didn't match what the corporate records had shown. This wasn't just an employee. Lena Hart was the heart of the Seattle store. And maybe the only reason it hadn't crumbled like so many other locations. Later that week, during a hectic closing shift, a massive last-minute order came in. Over 6 dozen almond morning buns needed for a corporate brunch. Jackson was told to help Lena. He pretended to fumble with the dough, let it slip, roll unevenly, like a novice just trying to keep up. But Lena caught it immediately. "Like this," she said, placing her hand over his, guiding the fold. "Feel the tension in the dough. It'll tell you what it needs." Her hand, calloused, scarred, but steady, felt like a roadmap of someone who had survived more than one kind of fire. That's when Jackson noticed the tattoo peeking from under her sleeve, a small black flame inked just above her wrist. "You've done this before," she said suddenly, her voice sharp, like a chef's knife cutting through the silence. Jackson hesitated. "Guess I've just got good hands." Lena stared at him for a moment, long enough to make him feel seen, not exposed, but written, like she was deciphering a book he didn't know he'd written. That night, back at the motel, Jackson sat frozen as the pieces started falling into place. Hamilton Financial wasn't just some lender. They were financial predators, specialists in rescue loans for small business owners with nowhere else to turn. Their contracts were inescapable, their interest rates brutal. Their model thrived on desperation, on dreams left unguarded. Lena had been paying them for over 7 years. And worst of all, the principal balance hadn't even moved. The next morning, Jackson stepped into the bakery. Butter, cinnamon, warmth. They were all still there. But the scent couldn't cut through the bitterness in his throat. Lena was already at her station, rolling, cutting, shaping, but slower. Her movements lacked their usual rhythm. The bags under her eyes looked deeper, her shoulders more burdened. "Tough night?" Jackson asked as he tied his apron beside her. "Thinking." She didn't look up. Same as usual. But Jackson knew better. This wasn't usual for anyone. He had a new mission now. During the lunch break, as Monica, the store manager, was distracted with a late delivery, Jackson quietly slipped into the back office. Her terminal was still open. A careless mistake, one he mentally noted to follow up on later, when he wasn't pretending to be someone else. He pulled up Lena's file again, scanned for emergency contacts. Only one name appeared: Jason Hart. Same last name, likely her brother. A cold unease settled over Jackson's chest. He searched through the HR system, then public records. Jason Hart, deceased. Cause: car accident on Interstate 5. Date: exactly 1 month after a reported fire at a business. It couldn't be coincidence. Why was Lena still paying a debt tied to someone who was no longer alive? Later that afternoon, Jackson offered to run an errand, pick up supplies from a sister location across town. But his real reason was Caroline Madison, a longtime regional manager who had been with Golden Harvest for over a decade. If anyone remembered Lena's beginnings, it would be her. Still in character as Evan the trainee, Jackson caught her while she was checking vendor invoices. "I'm doing a little research on retention strategies," he said casually. "Just curious about long-term employees. You remember when Lena Hart started?" Caroline's face softened instantly. "Lena? Oh, of course. I remember her like it was yesterday. She doesn't talk much," Jackson added. "Hard to get a read on her." Caroline nodded, her voice dropped. "She came to us right after her brother died." "Jason?" Jackson asked. "Yes. They had a small bakery together, Heart and Hearth up in the North End, just the two of them. Parents were gone. Jason handled the books. Lena did the baking. Their morning bonds were already legendary back then." "What happened?" Caroline sighed. "The recession hit. Jason took out a big loan to expand. New ovens, new equipment. They had a deal lined up with a bank, but the bank collapsed before finalizing the paperwork, so he went to a private lender. Terms were brutal." Jackson didn't need to ask. He already knew who the lender was. Then came the fire. Faulty wiring in one of the new ovens. The insurance wouldn't cover it, said the permits weren't finalized. Carolyn paused. Her next words were softer. A month later, Jason drove off the highway. The air in the room thickened, hanging heavy like a storm about to break. "And Lena," Caroline continued, her voice soft but steady. "She walked into the downtown store that day, sleeves still dusted in flour. She didn't beg, didn't cry. She just said, 'I need work, any kind of work.' She wasn't the same girl we used to know. Something in her had shut down. Hollow, but she kept going. Like a machine, no pause, no collapse." On the drive back to the flagship location, Jackson sat in silence. The engine hummed beneath him, but his mind was racing. He pulled out his phone and accessed Golden Harvest's internal archives, searching through the product development files from 8 years ago. He typed in Jason Hart. No results under vendors, nothing under external partnerships. But buried inside a dusty subfolder labeled Unsolicited Submissions, he found it, a scanned PDF. Title: Proposal, Jason Hart. Subject: Signed, Sourdough Formula. The document included detailed ingredient ratios, fermentation schedules, proofing techniques, cost-benefit analysis, and market positioning. At the top, one line: Status: Rejected, not aligned with brand direction. Jackson's jaw tightened. He had seen this language before. It was corporate speak for file it away and wait for them to forget. But this time, the language, the format, even the timing of the submission, it all aligned perfectly with the launch of Golden Harvest's now celebrated Heritage sourdough line, released just 6 months later. He dove deeper, accessing the executive-only portal. Comparing the original formula with the one Golden Harvest currently used, ingredient ratios, identical. Fermentation temps, exact. Grain blend, matched gram for gram. Then, digging through archived internal emails, he found a chain of messages marked confidential, correspondence between Connor Vance and the executive product development team. Connor Vance, the former VP of product development, the man who departed 5 years ago under vague allegations of misconduct, the same man who had received a 6-figure bonus for developing the Heritage sourdough line. But the truth was clear now. It wasn't his formula. It was Jason Hart's, a man who had died believing that his life's work had been worthless. A man whose sister, Lena, was now working 14-hour days, breaking her body and soul just to repay a loan that should have never existed in the first place. Back at the store, Jackson pulled out his tablet and opened a financial report. "I've been tracking revenue from the Heritage sourdough line since it launched," he said quietly. "Even using the most conservative estimates, the value of your brother's formula exceeds $4 million. Lena's eyes widened, her breath catching. "That's enough to clear my debt," she whispered, "and then some." Jackson nodded slowly. "I reviewed the original submission too. There's a clause buried in the legal jargon, but it's there. It states that if any portion of a submitted concept is used in part or in whole, appropriate compensation must be provided. Connor Vance ignored that clause. Deliberately." Lena dropped her gaze. Her fingers tightened into white-knuckled fists on her lap, nodded in quiet rage and grief. "Jason worked on that formula for years," she said, her voice thin as paper, but trembling with weight. "It was based on our grandfather's old recipe, but Jason modernized it, adjusted it for shelf life, flavor balance, fermentation timing. He believed it could change everything for us. He truly did." She paused. Her next words broke like glass underfoot. When the rejection came, he thought it meant he'd failed, that he was the failure. That's why he went to Hamilton. He just wanted one last shot to prove it had worth. Jackson felt the weight of it all settle on his shoulders like stone. Not just the burden of a broken system, but a moral debt the company had never acknowledged. "I couldn't sleep the night I put it all together," he admitted. "I kept thinking about all the mornings I bit into our sourdough, proud of our brand, never knowing who really created it." He looked at her, really looked at her. "Meanwhile, you were here, before dawn, every single day, killing yourself to repay a debt that never should have been yours." Lena looked up, her voice barely audible. "So, what happens now?" It wasn't a question about money. It was a question about truth, about repair, about justice. Before Jackson could answer, the back door creaked open. Logan stepped inside with two other early shift employees. They froze at the sight. Lena seated beside Jackson, legal documents spread across the prep counter. "Even?" Logan asked carefully, confused. "Everything okay?" Jackson stood up, taller now, his demeanor shedding the last of the trainee act. His voice had a new gravity. "Logan, I need you to call Monica. Ask her to come in immediately. Then contact regional management. Tell them we're calling an emergency meeting for 9 a.m. Logan blinked, visibly stunned. "I don't think I can just... Wait, who should I say is calling the meeting?" Jackson met his eyes head-on. "Tell them Jackson Reeves is calling it." Logan's jaw dropped. "You're it?" "Yes." He turned back to Lena, who had yet to move. Her expression was no longer guarded. It was clear, focused. "In the meantime," Jackson said softly, "we've got some final numbers to calculate." The next few hours were a blur of movement. Word traveled fast. Staff arrived early, confused. Regional managers flew in or patched through via video call, rattled. Rumors buzzed in the hallways. No one knew the full story. But behind the closed doors of the office, Jackson and Lena sat shoulder to shoulder, reviewing every document, every archived email, every ledger, every royalty report, every decision made, right or wrong. By 9:00 a.m. sharp, the emergency meeting commenced in the conference room at the Seattle flagship store, the heart of Golden Harvest. 6 members of the leadership team were present. Some flew in overnight, others joined via Zoom. Lena sat next to Jackson, her flour-dusted apron still on, her hands clasped tightly, her spine upright, like steel forged from years of surviving. Jackson rose, took the head of the table. On the wall behind him, the screen displayed a single line of text: "Intellectual Property System Violation." Heritage soured a line. He didn't waste time. 8 years ago, he began, voice unwavering. Golden Harvest launched what would become its second most profitable product line. It was built on a formula submitted by a local baker, Jason Hart. He clicked the remote, slide change. "This is the original proposal, timestamped." Verified, rejected officially, yet used in practice. The next slide showed a side-by-side comparison. Jason's original ratios, proofing times, flour types, perfectly aligned with the internal recipe attributed to Connor Vance. "This isn't coincidence," Jackson said, looking each executive in the eye. "This is theft." The room stilled. Monica looked physically ill. Logan stood silent in the corner, arms crossed, watching. Lena said nothing. She didn't have to. Another slide. Connor Vance's bonus package, over $250,000 0 cents within 2 years of the Heritage launch. Next slide. Internal memos. Vance presenting the formula as an in-house innovation. Vance left the company 5 years ago under unrelated allegations, Jackson said. But this theft, this lie, remained buried for nearly a decade. A voice crackled through Zoom. "This is highly irregular," said Evelyn Granger, chairwoman of the board. "You went undercover without board approval. You've made serious accusations against a former executive." "With all due respect, Evelyn," Jackson interrupted, his voice low but razor-sharp. "What's truly irregular is that the man who created this product died believing he was a failure, while his sister has worked in our kitchens, underpaid, overworked, and drowning in debt caused by the success of his stolen formula." Next slide, projected clearly across the room. Heritage sourdough, lifetime revenue, $12,400,000, 0 cents. And Lena? She had turned down every promotion, declined every bonus, volunteered for double shifts, And all the while, she was still quietly paying off a loan that was slowly draining the life out of her. A voice broke the silence. Franklin Doyle, the oldest member of the board, cleared his throat. "What exactly are you proposing?" Jackson didn't pause. His voice was calm, clear, and resolute. "3 things," he said. "First, Golden Harvest will pay off the entire remaining debt Lena owes to Hamilton Financial. Second, the company will issue financial restitution for the unauthorized use of Jason Hart's intellectual property. Based on standard industry precedent, that figure amounts to $3,200,000, 0 cents. Third, we will create a new leadership role, Director of Artisan Product Innovation. Lena Hart will lead the traditional product line with full creative autonomy and a revenue-sharing agreement." "You're overstepping your authority," Evelyn Granger snapped, her voice sharp with restrained panic. Jackson met her gaze coolly. "Then review it. Make it official." He paused. "And if you won't? I'll forward the complete dossier, including time-stamped emails, discrepancies in financial attribution, and internal misuse of intellectual property, to Food and Culture Weekly. They've already reached out, interested in doing a feature on our heritage, sourdough. I have a feeling they'd be more than happy to name the real creator." A wave of stillness passed through the room, thick and heavy, like dough that had failed to rise. "You wouldn't drag your own company through the mud," Franklin said, almost pleading. "I'll do whatever it takes to restore its integrity," Jackson replied, "because the sin isn't in exposing the truth. The sin is in burying it." Evelyn shifted in her seat, then sighed. "In that case, Golden Harvest will formally acknowledge Jason Hart as the original creator of the sourdough formula. His name will appear internally and across all public-facing materials, product packaging, marketing campaigns, and store signage." Lena's throat tightened. Her heart pounded as if it had been waiting years to hear those words. Evelyn continued, her tone less clipped now. "Furthermore, Lena Hart will be offered the role of Director of Artisan Product Development, with full creative oversight, executive-level salary, and profit-sharing retroactive to the launch of the product line. The legal documentation will be finalized within 5 business days." Lena blinked, as if waking from a trance. "You're serious?" Evelyn nodded once. "We are, and we're deeply sorry for all of it." The call ended. The screen went black. Silence. Logan, who had stepped in quietly near the end, exhaled a low whistle. "Holy what?" Jackson stood, slowly pushing his chair back. "Are you okay?" he asked Lena. She nodded, but the stunned look in her eyes hadn't faded. "I think so." He handed her a folder. "That's a draft of your offer letter. You're welcome to take your time with it, have a lawyer look it over. There's no pressure." She took the folder with both hands, as if it weighed more than just paper, as if it held the truth she'd spent years convincing herself she no longer deserved. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why did you do all this?" Jackson hesitated, then told her the truth. "Because I know what it feels like to owe more than you make in a year. I remember walking into a bank and being offered a kind smile backed by a 24% interest rate. I know what it's like to lose someone you love and spend years wondering if you failed them by not fighting harder." He looked at her, not out of pity, but with quiet reverence. "But most of all, because if we're running a company where thieves get rewarded and courage is ignored, then I don't want my name on it anymore." Lena didn't cry, but her eyes shimmered with something deeper than tears. She glanced away, then back again. "Can I show you something?" She led him back into the kitchen. The ovens had cooled. The scent of cinnamon and brown sugar still lingered in the air like a memory refusing to fade. In the far corner of the prep table sat an old notebook, its cover peeling, its pages stained with flour and ink. She opened it carefully. The first page was dated over a decade ago, the handwriting, neat, slanted, unmistakably Jason's, read, Jason Hard, Morning Bun Experiments. Below that, notes on yeast ratios, baking temps, test results. Then another page, and another. Dozens of entries, hundreds of adjustments, years of meticulous obsession, laid out like a quiet symphony on paper. Wrote everything down, Lena whispered. Every failure, every tweak. She flipped to a page labeled Version 4.3, Final. This is the one we use now, she said softly, every single morning. Jackson scanned the ingredients. He'd memorized the company's version years ago. It matched perfectly. Didn't just want to make something good, Lena said, her voice firming. He wanted to make something that would last. She turned to the final page. There, in bold handwriting, underlined twice. Give credit, always, even when no one's watching. She closed the book. I think he would have liked you, she said gently. Jackson's voice broke slightly. I wish I could have met him. But maybe, in a way, he just met me. 3 weeks later, the Golden Harvest flagship store in Seattle looked nearly the same. Same trays clattering in the morning rush. Same ovens humming to life before dawn. Same scent of cinnamon, butter, and caramelized sugar dancing through the air. But beneath that familiar surface, everything had changed. Just to the right of the main register, mounted on the wall, was a small bronze plaque in honor of Jason Hart, whose recipe and resilience built the foundation of this legacy. A true artisan, never forgotten. Every morning Lena passed that plaque. She didn't stop, didn't pause. But her shoulders stood straighter now. Her spine carried a quiet kind of pride. She wore a new apron, her name embroidered in white thread and beneath it, in silver stitching, Director of Artisan Product Development. She still arrived by 5 o'clock a.m. But now, she didn't just bake. She mentored, she listened, she reviewed proposals with the legal team. She reminded every apprentice that brilliance doesn't come from titles. It's born in calloused hands and unrelenting hearts. Upstairs, behind the glass wall of the conference room, Jackson Reeves stood quietly. He'd watched her most mornings since the meeting, but today felt different. Monica stepped in and handed him a black coffee. The press picked up the story, she said. We're being flooded with submissions from home bakers, small-town pastry chefs, even a retired schoolteacher in Ohio. Jackson smiled faintly. Good. Monica watched him. You didn't do all of this just for Lena, did you? He shook his head. No, I did it for all of us. Built Golden Harvest on one belief, that value comes from the people who create it. But when I dug into our own records and saw that the second most successful product in our history had been stolen and no one had ever questioned it, I realized something terrifying. He set the coffee down, still untouched. If a company becomes big enough to steal and get away with it, it also becomes big enough to collapse under the weight of its own hypocrisy. He exhaled. This wasn't just a course correction, it was a reckoning. Because the moment we stop protecting the creators, the moment we forget who built this place, we stop having the right to exist. Downstairs, Lena stood beside 2 junior bakers, guiding them as they shaped a new holiday variation of the morning buns. One of them hesitated. What if someone steals this one too? Lena looked at the plaque on the wall. Emily won't, she said calmly. But how can you be sure? She glanced up, toward the glass wall where she knew Jackson often stood. Because now, someone's watching, and finally someone cares who gets the credit. That night, Jackson sat alone in his office. On the desk lay a letter. Inside was the original handwritten version of the sourdough formula, Jason's. Lena had mailed it back, along with a note. Don't forget why this matters. For the next Jason. Oh. He read it once, then again, and as the city lights shimmered against the windows, he didn't feel proud. He felt responsible, because this story was never just about a stolen recipe. It was about a system that quietly taught creators to stay silent and taught power how to take credit. Golden Harvest didn't just owe Lena a check. It owed Jason a name, and it owed every future creator something else entirely. A promise, not of wealth, but of fairness, of acknowledgement, of dignity. Because if ideas are no longer protected, what value does effort still hold? And if credit always follows power instead of truth, what kind of justice are we even building? And if you've stayed with us until now, thank you. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where we believe the human spirit is never truly defeated, only waiting to rise.